Hi, I'm Abigail Petersen, and these are my models of the neuron and the brain. In the back is my model of the neuron, in the front left is my model of primarily the cerebral cortex, and in the front right is my cutaway model of the inside of the brain. These two different models of the brain will allow you to see different parts more clearly. Let's begin with the neuron. The neurons are cells that are responsible for communicating throughout the brain. The nucleus of the cell, which I've depicted in dark green, is located in the soma, or the cell body. Branching out from the soma are many dendrites, or branching receptors that receive input from other neurons. The electrical impulses that the neurons primarily use to communicate travel along the axon and ultimately end at the terminal button, which I've depicted here in red. These terminal buttons hold many vessels for neurotransmitters, or the chemical messengers of the brain. You'll notice along the axon that there are many blobs of blue, which represent the myelin sheath. The myelin sheath insulates the axon and allows the current to travel more smoothly along it. You'll also notice that there are gaps in the myelin sheath. These are called nodes of Ranvier. It turns out that the electrical impulse can travel more quickly, not just straight down the axon, but when it jumps across the myelin sheath from node to node to node. This is truly a testimony to the genius design of our Creator. He allowed the current to travel more quickly by jumping from node to node, but yet he protects the many neurons in the brain from interfering with each other by way of the myelin sheath. Next, let's turn our attention to the brain. The brain sits atop the brain stem, which has two parts that I've depicted here. The bottom part is the medulla. It manages all the automatic processes of the body, including breathing, heart rate. Atop the medulla is the pons, which is Latin for bridge. In addition to bridging the brain and the spinal cord, it manages sleep. The rest of the brain, then, is split between the two models. The outer part, most of the cerebral cortex, is on the left-hand side, and the inner parts within the cerebral cortex are on the right-hand side. Let's focus on the left first. The cerebral cortex is split into 4 different lobes. The lime green lobe I've depicted here is the frontal lobe. It controls many things, but among them are reasoning, movement, emotion, and language. Behind the frontal lobe is the parietal lobe. It manages sensory processing. Right next to both of these lobes, and behind the ear, is the temporal lobe. It processes hearing, emotions, memory, and some language. Finally, towards the back of the head is the occipital lobe, and it manages visual input. I'd like to draw your attention to 2 other sections within these lobes. Within the frontal lobe is Broca's area. It controls language production, and within the temporal lobe is Wernicke's area. It controls language comprehension. To truly understand and speak a language, both of these areas must be fully functional and must cooperate together. Finally, at the very back of the head is the cerebellum, which is Latin for little brain. That area controls movement and balance. Let's then turn our attention to the structures on the inside of the brain. You can still see the cerebellum and the brainstem. Running up through the brainstem is a bundle of nerves which I depicted in green. This is called the reticular formation, and it manages alertness. At the top of the brainstem is the thalamus. It routes all senses except smell to other parts of the brain for further processing. Right under the thalamus is the hypothalamus, which maintains homeostasis, or constant levels such as temperature, throughout the body. Winding around the thalamus is the hippocampus, which I've depicted in lime green. It manages learning and memory. And at the end of the hippocampus is the amygdala. It controls emotional experiences and attaches emotions to our memories. There are 2 important glands of the endocrine system located within the brain. The pituitary gland, shown in the front of the thalamus, is the master gland of the entire endocrine system, and the pineal gland, more towards the center of the brain, produces melatonin, which is important for sleep. Finally, there's one more very critical component which I have shown in my brain model. It is the corpus callosum. It joins the right and the left hemispheres of the brain and allows them to communicate freely. One important or interesting brain fact that I learned was that a brain can be affected by an injury depending on where that injury hits on the head. For example, if I bump the back of my head, my cerebellum will be affected, and I might feel dizzy because the cerebellum controls my sense of balance. If someone hits his Broca's area, he might not be able to speak any longer because the Broca's area controls language production. I hope you enjoyed my